right. We are live. Hello, YouTube. Yes.
Hello, YouTube.
Tron DD says right after the next episode hits the feed, that's when we will appear. That's almost true. I have one ready to go. I have to hit the button and then 78 will go out. 278, the 1978 one.
I got to say, our streams start better than most. We actually start by saying, hello, YouTube, or something along those lines. Every other single stream in the world starts with, I think we're recording. Are we recording? Can you guys see that? Nice. Yeah. And then it lives like that forever on YouTube. It's like, at least maybe edit that out when you post the final video. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just funny. They all start.
Can you edit? I suppose you can. Uh-oh.
Yeah. You can. So YouTube does have very limited editing that you can do on the video on the platform. So once it's uploaded, you can like trim the ends of it, and you can do a few simple things like that, which is actually super handy sometimes.
Cool. There's a little bit of network issue, which I hope isn't on my side, but probably is. But anyway, I have two Wi-Fi networks that I can connect to here, and it sort of alternates between them, which one is the better one to be on, which is great.
Sounds frustrating. You seem fine. I don't see any connection issues with either of you, so
okay.
Fingers crossed.
Okay. I can't get myself centered. There we go. There's a light. Hold on.
It's okay if you're not perfectly centered.
Yeah.
You should be in the right or left third.
Yeah, I've got stuff all over the
Cinematography
screen.
101.
Let me put my earplug in.
This is the riveting content that people come to the RCR for.
Yep. At some point when we were doing this, we decided, all right, well, maybe we should turn the stream on because people are waiting. But this is what we were doing.
Yeah. For everyone on the stream, it was 20 minutes of this before we turned it on YouTube. So this is what you've missed.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Well,
okay.
I can just start and then fix it in post.
Ended mic. Do I sound clear?
Talk a little bit more.
To my intended mic. Does it sound as if my volume is okay? I could increase the level a bit. Does that sound good?
Or? Yeah, that sounds okay.
Yeah, that sounds fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little before that, it seemed like you were cutting out a little bit, which maybe you had a filter on it or something.
Okay.
But
this sounds
better.
I'm talking in sentences. Okay, great.
Yeah, you sound fine now. Great. Don't touch anything.
All right. It's November 17th, 2024, and welcome to episode 281 of the Retrocomputing Roundtable. The RCR is a podcast about retro computer news, nostalgia, collecting, and I don't know what. Once again, I got to this point where I did not prepare at all. It's about nostalgia, collecting, and
1981.
I guess that seems like a sort of a poor way to do this, but okay, yeah. Nostalgia, collecting, and all things 1981. Some things 1981, and an occasional thing 1981. Some things that are more important than are rated as more important than they ought to be.
Yes, exactly.
We were talking a little bit about Wikipedia. Oh yes, I'm Paul Hagstrom from Boston, and I am joined by two retrocomputing enthusiasts today. The first is Quinn Dunkey in rural British Columbia. How are you?
Hello, I'm excellent. The first sign of winter is here. We had what is definitely technically snow this morning. It did not stick to anything and is now gone, but it's wet, and it was definitely officially snowing. So winter is coming, as the kids say.
That's right. Excellent. Also joining us is Blake Patterson in Northern Virginia. How are you?
I'm doing fairly well. I'm at the tail end of a illness. Pardon my voice, but caught with some travels visiting my daughter in New Orleans for Parents' Weekend, her first year of college. So planes, trains, automobiles, streetcars, and boats. Somewhere along the line, I managed to contract the illness. But anyway, I'm doing well. It's considerably warmer here than where Quinn is currently located. I just went for a walk. I think it's about almost 80, 70, 78
Wow.
or so.
Wow.
But autumny and pretty outside, so colorful. Anyway, but yeah, pardon me. I'm doing fairly well.
Well-timed cough.
Yeah. If Blake dies during this stream, it's never getting uploaded, and nobody saw nothing.
Right.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's I think it's sort of in between your weathers here. It's kind of nice, but it's still not t-shirt weather outside anymore. But I think we've had no sticking snow or no snow at all yet, but it's got to be soon.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yes, let's see. It doesn't matter. So we have been trying to kind of parallel the episode numbers with the topic year number. This is episode 281, and so the topic year is 1981. And so we can sort of start off by talking about things that happened in 1981, in computing history. So let's see. Actually, maybe I will start with one that between the last episode and this episode, we had a sort of failed episode where it was just Carrington and me talking, but an entry was given to us then. All of this is going to be cut out, but okay. So I guess the first one I'll mention is the BBC Micro. The BBC Micro got launched in December 1981. So do we all have fond memories of the BBC Micro?
That's a machine I've always been interested in, but I still have never seen one in person or touched one or used one. But it was a very capable machine, like nice graphics, lots of memory, nice keyboard. By all accounts, they seem to be very nice machines. Just never had the chance to use one.
Yeah, I never used one. I think I heard about them first back in like the 6th grade. In our library, we had a magazine, periodicals room, and they had all these old creative computing magazines that went a little further back than the I think it was like 84, and they were it was briefly offered in the States. It was primarily obviously a British European computer, but they made an attempt, I guess, over here, and so I read a little bit about it. But it became much more interesting learning more in recent years, and how it was meant to accommodate and did foreign processors, which was kind of a interesting aspect. And so kind of a big thing over there. But I've never sat in front of one.
I was sort of virtually exposed to it a lot because Canada and the UK overlap a lot culturally. So we have a lot of British magazines and news and so on. And so one of the things we had were the Usborne programming books and similar types of things that are all from Britain. And so, of course, they all had like BBC tutorials and code and content in them. Then we had a lot of computer magazines from the UK that had BBC content in them. So I was sort of aware of its existence because I would see these listings, in the Usborne books where there'd be some little game you could type in, and there would be an Apple version and a BBC version and a Spectrum version or whatever. And two of those computers I had never heard of or seen, but I was sort of knew it existed over there in some capacity. So I sort of feel like I know it. It's sort of like feeling like an author that you read a lot, but you've never met them. So your impression of them is artificial.
It's interesting. I have on the shelf, I guess it was been 15 or more years. I guess about 15 years ago, I started subscribing to the then new magazine. I've got a 3 bookshelf spans full of Retro Gamer magazine out of the UK. UK based. So I learned a whole lot about gaming and home computers, in the UK and Europe in general. And so like at this point, I feel almost like, even though I've never sat in front of one, you mentioned the Spectrum, the ZX Spectrum, the BBC Micro, ORC, those things I feel like I know a whole lot about, but all from reading that gaming magazine. And they were, and the Apple II was over there too. But yeah, those were the big ones over there for the UK folks. So, they're kind of familiar.
Yeah, and I mean the BBC Micro was called that because of the push of the BBC to get this into the schools and make this the educational computer.
Competition, so kind of.
Everybody had it.
Yeah,
I don't know if everyone had it at home, but everybody had it.
Yeah, I was actually just gonna say that was my understanding, is that it was mainly an educational machine because they were expensive. Apparently, like people couldn't afford them at home, so everybody at home had a ZX81, but at school everyone had the BBCs.
They had BBC had a Acorn did the BBC Micro, and they had the Electron, which was kind of a cheaper, as I understand it, cheaper take on the BBC Micro that more people had at home. But yeah, I think the ZX Spectrum was the real cheaper one that everyone was using at home. The film, I don't think you just mentioned this. If you did, I apologize.
We didn't. No.
Micromen is a good. I rather enjoyed the history of it's basically about the competition that the BBC was pushing to get an official computer for their schools, and there were others entries, so to speak, but these guys got it, and it has a few big name people, and of course you gotta love a movie that has someone playing Clive Sinclair, but I can't think of the actor's name, but who's the person who plays the main person in charge of the Acorn guy. He's like Frodo from The Hobbit. I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
He's in Sherlock and Love Actually, and I can't think of the guy's name, but he's pretty big nowadays.
I know who you mean, but yeah.
Anyway, it's well acted. It's a good movie. Check out Microman. It gives you the whole history of this thing, and it's fun.
Mm-hmm. Martin Freeman.
Martin Freeman. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's sort of like a Pirates of Silicon Valley, very much kind of an analog, but with the whole BBC Micro push. And interestingly, the BBC Micro, I mean, it had the ability. It was built with the ability. I think they call it the tube connector to add external processors, and it was utilizing this capability that Acorn themselves went ahead and developed the first ARM processor, the RISC system. They were, as I understand it, building it off of the BBC Micro, using it as a host, kind of to develop that. So that's kind of interesting history too.
Well, and of course the Acorn Archimedes, where the name comes from. Yeah. It's my favorite retro joke. It's the real winner of the home computer wars was the Acorn Archimedes, because now every single processor and everything we use is an ARM processor.
Yeah. Indeed.
Also, one other thing, I'm showing a little bit of Microman here. I wonder if that's going to result in a YouTube strike, but I guess it's on YouTube. So, but the person who's playing Clive Sinclair himself, I actually know him relatively well. That's Alexander Armstrong, and I know him relatively well as a game show host. He's the host of Pointless, which is a super popular game show in the UK. So, but anyway, let's see. There was something. I think there was something else I was going to say. Oh, well, I know at least one other thing I was going to say was that I did have. I've mentioned this many times, but one of those North American BBC Micros somehow made it into. I guess it was my elementary school.
I thought you were going to say your office, your faculty office, shelving system. No, okay.
No,
but there is one in there, right?
There isn't. No, I've been hoping I could get one at some point, but
I'm surprised.
Yeah, but so I actually, I did have one at home for a little while, and they're actually quite large. I mean, somehow it doesn't, like, the pictures of them never quite, I don't know, reveal quite how much space they take up, but they are pretty big.
That's cool that you had one though, or had access to one. Those North American models were incredibly rare. Like they made very, very few of them. I mean, I've certainly never seen one or known anyone who's had one or touched one.
Mhm.
I know a couple people now, like retro people, who have a British BBC and they run it off of a power adapter and and they have an old PAL, multi-sync monitor that can do PAL or whatever. But yeah, the actual North American ones were incredibly rare.
I
Yeah,
have
and
to
they
wonder.
Mhm.
I would say I have to wonder because, of course, it was these systems were PAL over there, and this was almost not at all used over here. But obviously, it was an NTSC version here in the States, and it's got to be an interesting, conversation as to how software and different just how things deal with the difference there, because we know that a lot of these systems, that's a breaker as far as what hardware you've got for display. Yeah,
It's probably not totally compatible. Like I bet a bunch of the BBC micro games
oh yeah,
don't work on the North American one because the NTSC,
Mhm.
the 60 hertz sync would be wrong. Like you can go the other way because the PAL, if you run NTSC signal on a PAL machine, it'll just chop off like the bottom 50 scan lines or whatever, and the frame rate will be a little off, but it still basically works. But you can't really go the other way because then you need those 50 lines back and everything. Yeah, the timing is all wonky.
Yeah, I had to switch I've switched different Amiga models here so that I could, when I was interested in loading, also at 8-bit Atari, so that I could look at demo scene software, all of which is PAL over here in the States, and yeah, it's just it's different hardware in some instances, but
there was one 2GS demo that actually required the machine to be in PAL. So the 2GS, you can switch it between, it'll run in TSC or PAL. You can switch back and forth. And there was a demo that required you to run in PAL because the 50 hertz cycle gave you a little bit more vertical blank time per frame. So they were doing effects that took advantage of the extra time. So it's kind of neat.
Oh yeah.
And the stock 2GS monitor would display PAL properly as well.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was neat.
Yeah, the so the one I had did not have a disk drive, so it was basically, I was just playing around with it, just to see what it would do, but nothing I did would ever like save, so it would be alive as long as it was still turned on. But it was kind of fun to play. The colors are striking. The other thing about the BBC Micro is it is the place where Elite, the video game, was created.
Yes.
So
yeah, definitely one of the great games of all time. Elite, pretty arguably the game that invented or at least popularized procedurally generated content. What we would now think of No Man's Sky for, these games that generated all of their content entirely from a pseudo random number generator. So it required no storage, but was the same every time, but felt basically infinite. Every planet, every stock market, every space station that you went to was all just generated from a random number.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Blake, I bet you'd like such a game. You should try this out. So at some point.
I should give it a shot.
Yeah.
I should give it a shot.
This feels like it might be your thing. I don't know why.
Procedural space. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it would feel sort of limitless.
Yeah,
I'm gonna look those up when I get off this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So yes. So that was actually, I guess that was a pretty big milestone of 1981. Also given the the ARM. But okay, let's see what else. I have down here that the Sony 3.5-inch drive was a 1981 thing.
Oh, I didn't know
That's
that.
I saw that too. That's a big one, obviously.
The media formats always are invented much sooner than everyone actually starts using them. Like the CD was invented in what, like 1977 or something, but then nobody really had them in their houses until the mid or late 80s. Yeah, so I guess the same must be true of the 3.5-inch disc. It takes a while to get everybody to start using it.
I think the first place that most people saw a 3.5-inch disc was almost certainly the original Macintosh.
They probably
made the decision, contrary to Steve Jobs' wish. They tricked the 3.5-inch into happening in a story involving a closet.
Yeah, you definitely have to read that on I think it's on
yeah.
whatever it is, Mac Stories or something, but
It's folklore.
folklore.org.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, the book that he. But I think it was used in some. The touchscreen HP. I remember a little bit earlier there was a touchscreen HP that had 3.5 inch drives. But the Mac. That was the first time I ever encountered physically one, was in the dealer seeing that. But I was going to say that, and that was a game changer, which it was. But of course, it's been quite some time since we really stopped using floppy drives as well. So
Right.
in my mind, it's still kind of recent. I was like, yeah, the 3.5, that really is a good innovation. But I guess it's really just a 3D printed save icon to a lot of people.
Yeah,
So
I love 3.5-inch discs though. They were so nice. Like they were just such a good size, and they were indestructible. You didn't have to have an envelope. You didn't have to be careful where you touched them all the time. Like you could just kind of throw a couple of them in your backpack or whatever. And you could just store them in a stack on the desk or in a rack on the shelf, and just super easy to handle. Yeah, I loved them.
One thing I didn't know earlier, before I read this thing about on Wikipedia, is that the 3.5-inch disc that Sony introduced actually didn't get adopted. So they introduced it, and then there was a little bit of a, like, I don't know, format fight or something, and eventually there was a consortium in 1982 that sort of updated it, and it's the consortium one that we know. I mean, Sony made drives that did it, but this initial Sony design was it was used in Sony's SMC-70 computer, a computer I do not know. But anyway, so a tiny bit of trivia there.
One thing that was always a source of nerd rage for me at that time was people who were new to computers would often call 3.5-inch discs hard disks, because to distinguish them from floppy disks, which they thought of as the 5.25, because they were bendy, but of course they were both floppy disks because they're floppy inside the packaging, and a hard disk is something completely different. And boy, that used to make me mad.
Yeah, those people were the worst.
I didn't have anything important to be mad about, so I got mad about that apparently. But yeah, that was a peeve of mine. I said the normies would call them hard disks.
I put on the screen the folklore.org story about essentially like hiding the Sony representative in the closet when the I guess maybe it was when Steve Jobs came by. Yeah. But so it's amusing. Definitely read it.
He was very determined to have the I guess the Lisa style 5.25 inch.
Yeah, they dodged a bullet there, because holy cow, those Twiggy discs were a disaster. I mean, even if they had worked,
good idea.
Even if it worked, we talked about how pleasant the 3.5-inch discs are to handle. The Twiggy discs are a step in the opposite direction. Like they're even harder to handle. Like you have to touch them by the edges. Like there's nowhere to hold them, and they have to have a special envelope. Like, oh my gosh, they're terrible.
Yeah, I think there's this particular photo, I think doesn't get any larger, but there's a little circle on most of these discs that say, like, put your thumb here.
Yeah.
Like it instructs you how to hold them.
Yeah, well,
there is one corner.
Yeah, there's one corner where you can touch it, because there's 4 windows where the disc is exposed outside of the packaging. So it's like you can't touch it anywhere without, probably wrecking it. Yeah, terrible.
Another thing, 1981 was actually a relatively big year, it turns out.
Yes,
but
this was on my list. Yep, the IBM PC 5150, that was on my list.
For some reason, I had thought of it as 1982, but released 1981, August 12th, 1981. So
and very, very expensive. I just relearned this recently. I was looking at an old advertisement for the Atari ST. So Atari's whole thing was that they were cheaper than everybody else at the time, and they had the prices of all the competitor machines. Now, of course, it's their ad, so who knows if the numbers are totally accurate. But they had the Apple Macintosh listed at around $2,800, and the 5150 came in north of $5,000. So, assuming that number is accurate, these machines were extremely expensive. So it wasn't, I guess, really until the clones that people started all buying PCs, because Nobody surely was buying these that cost twice as much as the Macintosh, which was notoriously expensive at the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when they first, you'd start seeing them in, stores as a kid. I noticed in like offices occasionally. And as a kid, it was quite a standout thing to see it. And in my neighborhood, we all had. Well, actually, that's not true. But very few of us had some kind of home computers. Most did not, of course, at that time. But yeah, this one kid down the way, his dad had this IBM PC, and it seemed crazy. This huge, expensive thing, and we were all kind of mesmerized by it. Going over to his house and messing around with it. While everybody else had like a Mattel Aquarius or a TI or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
They were very important looking machines.
Mm-hmm.
Like
they looked very daunting and serious.
Yeah, they were giant and made of steel, and had a gigantic power switch, and just they looked and felt very important and expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even the keyboard sounded and felt very serious stuff.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that is somewhere deep in the history of the creation of the PC was when IBM was thinking about it. I think so. I'm not actually sure if it which direction this went, but I guess Atari. I think Atari reached out to IBM, or maybe it was the other way around. But there was at least a proposal that IBM could just sort of rebadge an existing computer, and the Atari was one of them. So so it looks like I'm reading something on Ars Technica that says they proposed to IBM's chairman that if IBM wished to have a PC of their own, Atari would build it for them. The response to that was, at least from some of them, the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. But one thing that's cool is that there was someone did make a prototype of what this would be, and
I love that.
always loved this picture.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that looks exactly like the love child of a PC and an Atari 800. I love that.
Yes, the picture you're showing on the YouTube stream, that's nuts. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that story, like, I wonder how much of that is retro or retconning of history, because IBM was famously resistant to make a PC. And I seem to recall that they were looking for outsourcers for a long time, because they felt like they needed to get into that market, but they really didn't want to lower themselves to making garbage computers for little people. And so they were looking for someone to just do it for them, and they'd put their name on it. So I totally believe those Atari conversations happened, but I don't believe that they laughed Atari out of the room quite so much as that story says.
Yeah.
Because IBM had to be dragged kicking and screaming into the PC market, because their whole business model was based on not on selling widgets, but on selling service contracts for computing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was where they felt like the money was. It was in these subscriptions that companies were paying. Much like today, you can't get anyone to sell anything to you. They want to rent it to you.
Yep.
That was IBM's whole business model. So the notion of just making and selling computers one at a time was ridiculous to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for anyone not watching the live stream, what we're looking at is something it's a very white in color modified variant of the Atari 800. It looks, the best way to describe it, I think, is if someone took an Atari 800 and sucked all the fun out of it. That's basically what you're looking at.
Yeah, but I think that would be kind of what they would be going for anyway, right? Like, this is not for video games. This is for business.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They intentionally made it monochrome when they released it, because they didn't want to signal that it was any way for fun. Like, it was intentionally supposed to be, because I mean, I think part of the idea was that they could charge a lot more money for it. Then if it's a serious computer, then you can charge twice as much for it. If it's got color, then it's for games and is therefore a toy. So then they were trying really hard to avoid being looked at like a toy.
I remember the initial prototype had the space bar had a copper strip on it, and about every 5 to 6 minutes it would deliver a mild electric shock. So it was to make sure that you weren't
having any fun. Yeah.
That was ruled out in some of the group testing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think IBM would have had this problem, but that was a real problem for some machines. Like the Amiga never got taken seriously, largely, I think, because it was viewed as a games machine. Even though it was capable of so much more than that, it was never viewed as a quote-unquote serious computer or productivity computer. Same with the Commodore. I think because they sold them in Kmart, Commodore was never seen as anything more than just a game console with a floppy drive, even though it ran GEOS and it did all kinds of productivity things. It had that reputation.
Yeah, the Amiga with basically a very Unix-like preemptive multitasking operating system for relatively cheap, given that that never really mattered, or no one really knew what that meant anyway.
I mean, that impression matters to a non-computer person who's trying to buy their first computer, right? Like my dad bought an Apple II for us because the Commodore was a toy. Like that was how he viewed it. So he went and bought the Apple II because it was a quote it was a serious computer that would do serious things. And then sat in my bedroom and played games for 15 years. But, you know, when he bought it, he was thinking it was serious. So,
Right.
Yeah. The Amiga user group I was in 1985, when I got an Amiga, the first Amiga, there were all these guys from, like, we were local. My father worked at NASA. We were local to NASA, Langley. And there were a lot of these rather older fellows in the group that all had bought Amiga 1000s because they worked with Unix machines at the office at NASA, and they were like, wow, this is basically that, but for home. And they never even loaded up a game, but there was like 15, these older dudes in there that were just real happy to have basically a Unix system on their desk in 1985.
They just want to run Emacs. That's all academics care about. Just let me run Emacs on it.
Yeah, right.
One thing that and I was thinking when I looked at this that this actually looked a little bit like a Selectric or something, like an actual typewriter. I think it does have some hint of that. It is kind of crossed a little bit. It doesn't have quite the same shape as an Atari 800.
Yeah.
But
it has,
when I was looking at actual,
it has a certain typewriter-iness to it for sure. Yeah.
The bottom there, I guess, where the joystick ports used to be, there's just a missing notch under the front. I guess that they can just tear those joysticks out. Obviously, they weren't going to come with it, but that's the main case difference I think I can see as far as besides the color.
They just covered over the joystick ports so that you don't accidentally plug something in and accidentally have fun. That's
right. Yeah, the Apple III had joystick ports, but the joystick was for moving the cursor around your spreadsheet and or for connecting your printer.
Yeah. It's a serious stick, not a joystick.
That's right.
There's no joy.
Business stick, melancholy stick.
Spreadsheet stick. I don't know.
The stick of ennui.
Stick of ennui. Worst Dungeons and Dragons weapon ever.
So along with the IBM PC, we also have MS-DOS. That also August 1981. I guess that corresponded to the release of the 5150. It does seem to be the same day. And that, of course, has a story behind it, wherein Bill Gates bought a cheap operating system and then sold it for his present millions.
Yep.
But
he figured out early on that it's a lot cheaper to buy stuff, or a lot easier to buy stuff than to make stuff.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess sort of now I understand the difference between MS-DOS and PC-DOS, but only barely. I mean, maybe I don't even. Is PC-DOS just like IBM taking control back of the operating system?
I never totally understood the difference, to be honest.
I'm also in that same boat. I think they're 100% compatible, but I don't even know if they happily coexisted, if it's something that no one on either side was viewing as a problem. Was that even part of the initial licensing agreement? I don't know.
Yeah, it does say, like, this paragraph on Wikipedia does say IBM licensed and re-released it in 1981 as PC-DOS 1.0. I'm not sure that tells me much, but I know that in my head, I think of MS-DOS and I do not think of PC-DOS. Like the name of this thing is MS-DOS.
Yes.
But
yeah, it was probably a branding thing. Like you said, they were trying to maintain control of the platform, which they famously completely lost control of the platform. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was probably what it was.
Maybe it tied in some fashion as well, legally, the name and the, it being a separate product with OS2. IBM had its own take on Windows, and of course that had a DOS component compatibility. Maybe that was, I'm sure they used, PC DOS. Maybe that was strategic, headed in that direction as well. I don't know.
Okay, let's see. We're making our way quite slowly through 1981. Maybe we don't need to talk that much about the Osborne one. Every once in a while, I think maybe every episode it comes up and we ridicule its screen size.
Yeah, I feel like we talk about the Osborne a lot more than it deserves.
It was a small
No
screen.
offense, Osborne people, but come on.
Okay, what else? Xerox Star.
This was
okay.
This was 1981 also. Geez, this was a big year. I didn't. I'm a bad researcher. I didn't find any of this stuff.
I guess it's the successor to the Alto, or
It's
at least
the
yeah.
the commercialization of the Alto.
Commercial, yeah.
The Alto was the retail version, or was the research platform.
Research.
Star was when they were like, hey, maybe we should actually try to sell this thing that all of our competitors have come and looked at.
Yeah.
Release this quick before, and then it turns out people didn't want a refrigerator under their desk with.
I think the Star is arguably or definitively the first consumer, quote, consumer, which it really wasn't. It's professional, but system with a graphical user interface, I believe.
Yeah, I suppose it would be. I mean, if it came out in 81, then it would be. It beat the Mac by 3 years, so hard to imagine anything else coming before that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
and beat the Lisa by 2, I guess, right? So
the Lisa, yeah. But geez, introductory price of $56,000. I can hazard guess why it didn't take the market by storm.
Well, and that was 56. I mean, that's what it cost in 1981, right?
No, that's the adjustment.
That's the adjustment.
That's the adjustment.
Oh, okay.
It was 17.
I wouldn't even be surprised if it was. Okay.
Just about $17,000 in 1981 dollars. But I mean, it's no wonder Steve Jobs felt comfortable charging $2,500 in 1981 for the Mac, or 1984 when the only competitor at the time was the Star, which was $16,000. So
yeah. The Lisa was sold for, I believe it was $9,999, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Time. Like that was
I remember it being 10,000. Yeah,
which I guess would be equivalent to about what, 30,000 or 30, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, but so it did undercut the initial price of the Alto, but not by a huge amount.
Yeah, I guess they were trying to figure out what the market would bear. They kept bringing that number down until somebody started buying them.
Yeah. IPv4 was described in 1981.
That's a fad.
Yeah. Well, sort of. It kind of is, I guess, in a way, or at least it ran out, right?
Yeah. They've been trying to get rid of it ever since.
Yeah. Trying.
Yeah, we've been, quote, running out of IP addresses since like 1995 or something, and no one's ever done anything serious about it.
The attempt is still ongoing.
Yeah, we still stumble along. IPv6 is coming any day now. That's been, people have been saying that my entire adult life.
Yeah. Now I still avoid IPv6 whenever I can.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're asking for trouble if you enable it on anything. Like that's, unless you're an IT person.
I tried it once and it was a mistake. At the house on the LAN. It was not good.
Yeah, no, it's terrible.
Let's see, Kermit.
Oh, Kermit. I used Kermit.
Yeah, I feel like I missed the Kermit era by just a little bit. I mean, I used it sometimes when there was no alternative, and it was reliable but slow.
Yeah. Yeah, I used it on a couple of BBSs. which only had X modem, because it worked better for me than X modem. X modem was very flaky. So if the only option, there was a number of BBSs whose only options were Kermit and X modem. So I would use Kermit in those cases because it was a little slower. But yeah, I knew it would work at the end. Which X modem, it was like a rolling the dice every time you downloaded something.
Right.
I know I've talked about it here before, but in college, my first year as a computer science student, we used the Prime mini computer, and you would dial into it. There were a few terminals local, but you dial into it typically from your dorm or home or wherever, and it had a 7-bit connection, and one of the transfer protocols that can handle 7-bit connections. Everything else had an 8-bit connection, but 7-bit connection was Kermit. So we would do our Pascal. We were using Pascal, and you would upload it via Kermit. The only time I ever used the Kermit protocol was, to upload to this Prime, and you'd run your basic program. You could see what was not basic. Getting ahead of myself. The Pascal, and I remember every terminal program I've ever encountered almost has support for Kermit. But I've only used it in that capacity. But yeah, and the Prime itself would just be a whole interesting other side story. But it was a little mini computer. But yeah, so
yeah. I think today is a good day to badmouth both basic and X modem.
That's right.
You can still get Kermit if you go to kermitproject.org. What was the most recent beta was August 8th, 2024.
Wow.
Version 10, beta 11. So
it's always amazing how much of this stuff is still going.
Yeah. And I think, let's see, there was Kermit. It was supposed to be, I think it was originally named after the frog. But there's some backronym I'm not actually finding here that it was something sort of like KL10 error-free reciprocal microprocessor interchange over TTY lines is what they decided on.
That's a stretch.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. The AT command set, the Hayes AT command set was came with the smart modem in 1981.
Wow.
And never left. Even our our little Wi-Fi modem things respond to this AT command set.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's talk about another important part of our childhoods. AT, boy, I'm sure all of us had most of it memorized by the mid 80s.
Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
It's a badge of honor to be able to spew out some really long, complicated war dialing sequence entirely out of memory. The 80s equivalent of writing a regex just off the cuff.
I'm not sure if this was in the original command set, but so ATH is how you hang up. But at least some of them would take a parameter, so it could be like ATH0 or ATH1, and I didn't know. I mean, I like to think of ATH1 as like disconnect, with, assertively.
Prejudice, yeah. Slam it down.
But I don't know what that parameter actually was.
Kill -9 or yeah.
Yeah.
Just boom.
Yeah. Okay. What else? Well, I guess the smart modem itself too. That came with the instruction set.
I guess all modems that followed were basically clones of the Hayes smart modem, effectively.
Pretty much,
yeah. ZX81, I guess named after 1981. I didn't put that together.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Maybe it was. Yeah.
Huh. Maybe. I mean, it was based. The one that came before was the ZX80, and that was based on the Z80 or the Z80.
Right. Oh, yeah. It's probably just 81 because it's.
I wonder if it's just an
80 plus 1. Yeah.
But it also came out in.
That makes more sense.
So.
Yeah.
Maybe it was. Well, I mean, it could be a delightful language pun of some kind.
Yeah.
But
And then in Canada, we called this the Timex Sinclair 1000, I think.
Yep.
In the States as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think we did establish. Did we? I don't know. That I think the Timex Sinclair 1000 had just like a little bit more oomph, like it had a little more memory or something built in.
Yeah, that could be.
But otherwise, it was basically the same machine. And there was what is the 1500? The 1500, I think, was gray. Yeah. This is one I don't have, but this is whatever. Doesn't matter.
Never seen that one.
A business Timex Sinclair.
Yeah.
Well, and then they took the next one, which was like a ZX Spectrum, but it basically in hardware, except they had it just incompatible with ZX Spectrum software, but you could fix it with the cartridge. What was that?
It was the 2068, I think.
2068, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I am tapping on one right now.
Okay.
Of course you are.
But yeah, that's one. Yeah, another thing to play with that I've got it set like right here, ready to play with it. But that's the time has not presented itself. Okay, I think anything else? Anyone else found about 1981 that we want to talk about? Now that we're an hour in or something.
Yeah, I got a couple of items. I'll do them real quick.
Sure.
I've got tabs here just for fun. I actually looked up some stuff this time. So on today's segment of computers that we've all never heard of, apparently the ABC 800, the Luxor ABC 800 came out in 1981. It was a Swedish computer, which had 32K of RAM, ran based on a Z80, 40 by 24 text mode, 8 colors. So, pretty comparable machine to the others at the time, but just had never heard of it. There was a whole range of Swedish computers called the Luxors that I just never heard of somehow. So I quite like
cool.
the ABC 802.
Look at the pictures.
Yeah, this one's quite neat. It's got the floppy drives hanging off the side of the monitor in a pod, and the CRT is wrapped in a plastic bezel that looks very much like a prop from the movie Aliens. Like it's got that kind of retro dystopian futuristic kind of look to it.
Kind of makes it look like you are being held at gunpoint.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, funny things, but never had heard of them. All right, and then let's see.
Actually, the one other thing too, like I think the maybe the 800. Here, I'll put it up. I think this is like a little, maybe it's disk drives, but there's a little like disk drive box that it has a pleasingly sort of like it's like the top of a pet. It's got a sort of a trapezoid kind of shape.
Yeah, and what looks like a carry handle on the top, which is kind of nifty. Yeah, very interesting machine.
Yeah, I did not. I had never heard of this before, but now I want one.
Yeah. If there's any Swedish listeners out there who remember these or had one, I would like to know more about them. Pretty. And they went on for quite a while. Apparently, there was PC compatible ones, and like they went on for 10 years or so, making different models of them, so that they weren't a flash in the pan. Clearly.
Cool.
I've heard so little about these. It's interesting.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, the 80s were an interesting time. Every country had their own stuff going on because there was, no internet and we didn't have the international trade that we do now.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Otherwise, so Donkey Kong, the arcade game, came out in 1981. Obviously, a big deal. The first appearance of Mario, as we would now think of it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
He was just called Jumpman at the time, but he was later retconned to be called Mario. And let's see, the next thing I wanted to share was this guy, the EMU emulator, which is apparently the first digital synthesizer to use floppy disks for storage. So I don't know why, I just found this interesting. Came out in 1981. So it uses it has a big full height Shugart 5.25 inch floppy drive in it for saving your electronic masterpiece that you make with this keyboard synthesizer. We've talked about in previous episodes of this show how there was a whole world of weird proprietary floppy disk formats in things like stenography machines and synthesizers and word processors and so on. So this was apparently the first synthesizer to use floppy disks. I'm sure it used some mysterious proprietary format that no one has ever preserved or has any way to read. But
that's interesting. One of the things I enjoyed most about my DOS, I have a 46 setup, is I was big into the demo scene, into audio cards as a result, and there's the famous Gravis Ultrasound. I've got one, and I listen to it daily, actually, more or less. And but I remember at the time there was a card that came out in MIDI capacities. It was more advanced. You guys might remember the Sound Blaster. They had the AWE32, which was that was just a big breakthrough card. It had onboard RAM, and it had lots of really good features, interpolation, that kind of thing. But apparently it was the first PC synthesizer to adopt the EMU sound font standard. So I think EMU might have actually had some connection with not just the sound font standard. I believe that they were either responsible for the main audio chip on the card, or worked in conjunction with Creative or something like that. But that was kind of there was a rivalry, the Gus AWE32 rivalry, like Apple and Commodore. I remember I was on the Gus side of it because, of course, Gus superior. Anyway, but yes, these battles die hard. But yeah, so that I hadn't thought about EMU in a while. That just popped that memory out, Quinn. So
Cool.
But yeah. And I had only one. If you're still listing your 1981 items,
sure.
I don't know if Quinn.
Yeah, I'm done. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, just the one. The first, being a avid video gamer myself, the first apparently video game magazine appeared in 1981. Electronic Games, many of which I have on the shelf in physical form. I think this changed names with an ampersand and a few other words. He then changed, as these mags often did. But I don't know if it's still. I think it is actually still in production. No, actually, it probably isn't. It's still in production. But whatever the case, it had a long run, and this was the first video game magazine, and they were a big part of my youth. So yeah, but that's all I got for 1981. Then you mentioned everything else that happened.
Cool. Yeah, I just ran through a list, that was available.
That wasn't all from memory.
Right, it was not.
Okay.
Actually, thinking of the electronic games, that reminded me that I'll mention, I guess, at the end that I went to an estate sale. But one of the things that I picked up there was one issue of Electronic Games that had an interview with Douglas Adams in it. So
oh, that's great.
You're mentioning that reminded me that oh yeah, this is April 1985. Yeah,
that would be a fun thing to page through.
Yep, and I will no doubt do that at some point, maybe soon after I play with the 2068.
I was going to say, is it under the 2068? It's ready to go. It's ready to go. Excellent.
All right. So I think we've made it through the 1981 things, and so now we can move to items of interest in news. And I guess, Blake, you have the first one.
Sure. So I think a lot of people probably heard the news that Thomas Kurtz, I believe this past week, passed away. He was the co-creator of the BASIC programming language, which was probably, for many listening, the first programming language they played around with, even if they didn't really have a serious intention of, as a kid, becoming a programmer. That was sort of the point of BASIC. And so Kurtz, in conjunction with Kemeny, Kemeny's first name, but
John Kemeny.
Yeah, John Kemeny worked together to create the BASIC language, but it wasn't just randomly out of to create a new language. They had been working at Dartmouth on implementing a time sharing system, which came to be known as the Dartmouth the Dartmouth time sharing system, DTSS, 1963-64. And it was an operating system for their systems there that they were developing. And the purpose was to allow, lots of students, anyone who wanted to have access the computer hardware resources at Dartmouth. And then BASIC was sort of coupled with that as a way to, if you wanted to do something with the computer, have it do your bidding, you could do it in a way that didn't require you to have any sort of computer knowledge at all, really. At the time, the other languages were more professional targeted, assembly language, or I guess C. C was out there, but it wasn't too friendly for the non-initiated. And in a follow-up, and I actually I hadn't been aware that Kemeny and Kurtz were behind this, but in the early 80s, 83, they co-founded the company True Basic and released the product True Basic, which was a pretty snazzy version of the BASIC language long after the initial release. And there had been other versions. Obviously, all these home computers came with BASIC built in, which again was a testament, I guess, to how successful their effort was in making computers approachable and programmable. But anyway, True Basic was a popular one. I remember encountering it on several different systems folks were using. So, but yeah, so that was quite a achievement and a big piece of what I think many remember from their early days, and what inspired a lot of people. Certainly, it was a big inspiration for me to continue with programming, and and that's basically what I do these days. So yeah, but anyway, great achievement there. But he sadly passed this past week, and so.
Taken from us so young at 96.
Right.
Yes, I should have stated his age at 96.
Survived by 17 great grandchildren, apparently. So he
had
a good run there.
He did.
We should all be so lucky.
Lots of little programmers.
I don't think I've ever heard of True Basic before today. Somehow that never crossed my radar.
Okay.
So I guess 1964 was when BASIC was, and there was, so now I suppose in 2014 there was a BASIC at 50 celebration. The marking the 50th anniversary, and so Dartmouth had a big thing that might be worth taking a look at. If you're interested. I'm not sure that all that much was preserved from the from the program. Some videos of some talks and things were there, but Dartmouth is they're leaning into this history, at least, or they were at that point. And it's good that Kurtz made it to be able to speak at this event.
Yeah, that is kind of amazing that he died on the 50th anniversary of the thing he created.
Oh, well, no, I think it must be the 60th by now, right? Is that right?
60th. Okay.
Yeah. So he 10 years ago he was able to talk at this thing.
Gotcha.
And then, yeah. I feel like this was I feel like we talked about this more recently, but I guess 50 years ago, 50 years was 10 years ago.
I feel like we definitely talked about the fact that they were near each other in time. It was was it Turbo Pascal, and then the Pascal language itself. I think they celebrated rounded anniversaries within a few months of each other. It might have been like 50 and 60 years, or 40 and 50, something like that.
Yeah,
maybe that's what I do remember that.
May well be. Okay, let's see. What is next? Okay, I can talk about this. So this was news. I don't know. not super recently, but the San Francisco has okay, here we go. The San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency board has agreed to spend $212 million to get the Muni off floppy disks. So apparently there's still something that's using 5.25-inch floppy disks, and they've decided they're going to invest in getting off of that. And
they're not going to just buy they're not going to funnel all that money into a very custom tailored version of a GoTech floppy emulator that plug right into the train.
I have to think. I'm sure that they must have talked to some smart people in working through this project, but I'm sure almost everybody listening to my voice right now is thinking, how in the world could it cost that much? I mean, exactly. You just get a bunch of GoTech things or something.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, the internet is having a laugh about this, of course. Stupid government still using floppy disks, and is somehow going to spend a fortune to get rid of them. But so this story is actually pretty interesting. I was reading a lot about it because I was also interested in what is going on here. So that the cost is not so much about the floppy disks. It's about getting rid of the network system that the floppy disks are part of. So the system was put in the early 70s. And I think we all forget that prior to Ethernet, there were no networking standards, right? If you wanted to network the communication system of your big institution, in this case, a state spanning or city spanning public transportation system, you had to bring in Novell or IBM or somebody to custom design and custom build you a system to do this because there were no standards. And so they're using this very slow IBM networking system, semi-standard from the 70s. And it's that's very difficult to get rid of because it's integrated into, this vast array of systems spanning the entire city and spanning, thousands and thousands of embedded machines and locomotives and ticket stations and radio systems. The whole network is all built around this slow, crappy old IBM network. So it's really getting rid of that. That's the hard part. And that system relies on these floppies. So they've needed to keep using those as well to keep it running. But, and as anyone who's worked at big institutions knows, pivoting a system like that is very, very difficult, very slow, and very expensive because now they have to try and migrate this massive, massive system to something else without any loss of service, without any downtime anywhere in the system, which is incredibly difficult to do. So it's going to be, I'm sure, a years-long project with an army of IT people to sort of very gradually building compatibility layers so that they can swap portions of the system out for something modern without ever interrupting anything and making sure that nothing ever fails. Because of course you can't have the subway go down for 6 hours because someone didn't install the right driver or something. So it's a very delicate surgical kind of thing to migrate an enormous institution like that from such an old technology to such a new one. And that's why the inertia gets built up, right? Because it's only getting harder to migrate as time goes by. So the incentive is to never do it because it's just, now it's even harder to migrate because we're even further from the technology level of this thing that we installed in the 70s. So it's pretty hard to push past that, I think, and finally make the decision.
Yeah.
But so it's a nuanced problem and it's a hard problem and there's much more to it than the internet peanut gallery would have us believe.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it is actually surprising that they didn't, even in that little, just the part where the floppy drives were, they could have certainly replaced that with something else, even with the rest of the network up. But I can see that that's that the 212 million is not going toward that.
Yeah, everybody's telling the story from the floppy disk angle because that's funny. But I think the floppy disks they're a minor part of the situation. Like it's the network that needs to be replaced. I mean, the floppy disks are there and they still work. So why bother changing them? But it's not like the whole system depends on these floppy disks. I don't think it's really like that. It's just the system does have floppy disks involved. And so that's the thing that everybody latched onto because it's funny.
Yep. More fun to talk about for sure.
Yeah.
They ought to move to those 3.5-inch floppies.
Yeah. Those are more indestructible.
The hard disks.
All right. Yeah. So that's that. And I guess Quinn, you have the next one.
I do. So one more to add to the segment of the show where we all learn about a computer that we didn't know existed somehow after all this time. This came across my desk recently. This is that's the wrong. Where did my link go? Hold on. Oh, that's an ad. Okay. So this came across my desk. It's the ST Book, a notebook version of the Atari ST. And I don't know how many people knew this thing existed, but I sure didn't. And I got to say, it is super cool. Imagine if the PowerBook 100, one of the first Macintosh laptops, was an Atari ST instead. And that's basically what this thing is. It's very similar in design, very similar in look, very similar in performance, and a lot of the same kinds of design decisions and hardware decisions. So it's a 10.4-inch monochrome display. So obviously the Atari ST was famously a 16-bit color machine, but this display is only monochrome because that's obviously what they could afford and what they could get the battery life for it at this time. But it has a 68,000 running at 8 megahertz and had a megabyte of RAM. Similar to the PowerBook 100, it had no floppy drive in it, which is kind of neat. So it had an external floppy drive that you could plug in if you needed one. It had the famous Atari ST MIDI ports that were de rigueur for that platform, where they were on this thing. It also had a DMA port, which I don't know what that is exactly. It's a very unusual connector.
That's the hard. It's a hard disk interface. Basically, it's it's kind of like an SASI interface. All the STs had that. I was an ST guy for a while.
Okay, that was news to me. Okay. And it does have an internal hard drive, this thing, which is pretty cool. It has an internal IDE hard drive, which apparently was quite innovative at the time. It ran the Atari GEM operating system, just like you'd expect. It was all monochrome, of course, because it was a monochrome LCD. But yeah, it's really quite a neat machine. It's very attractive looking. It's a very nicely designed machine from an industrial design standpoint. For a mouse, it didn't use a trackpad or a trackball like the PowerBooks did. It actually has what they called a pressure pad. So imagine, you remember the nubbin that the ThinkPads had, that tiny little joystick that sat in the middle of the keyboard? It's kind of like that, except it's a disc, kind of like the Intellivision controller. So it's a disc that you put your thumb on and you apply pressure in different directions. And that was how you did the mouse pointer on this thing.
What year was this? Did I miss? I didn't hear.
I haven't seen
91. I think it said near the top somewhere.
91.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the PowerBook 100 was 91 as well, and it's much thicker.
Yeah, this article that I'm sharing was comparing it basically with the PowerBook 100. So apparently they came out at the same time, and it really is extremely similar in many ways, except it's an Atari instead of being a Mac.
And much thinner.
Yeah. Much thinner. Apparently had a much longer battery life than the PowerBook 100 did. So it's a really neat machine, and it's just something that I had no idea this thing existed. I had no idea there had ever been a laptop version of the Atari ST.
Yeah.
One of the nice things about this, in thinking about the PowerBook, is that even back in, the ST came out in 85, the original 520 ST in 85. Even I think it was a year later was the first. It was a cartridge-based Mac emulator. All it was the Macintosh ROMs, because it's the same CPU, and the ST could very solidly emulate the Mac at full speed. It actually had a slightly faster processor. I mean, fraction of a megahertz faster, but so it would have made, if you plug in one of those ROM cartridges where you could always load it by software, it should have emulated the Mac very solidly in a smaller, longer battery life fashion than the PowerBook 100 would have. Although the PowerBook 100 might have been a little bit faster.
Yeah, this thing was actually quite a bit slower than the desktop Atari ST. This thing was half the clock speed of the PowerBook 100, so it would have struggled probably to emulate it. But yeah, it's a neat thing. And then this article has a picture of someone named Tracy Hall, who is posed in front of the prototype of this thing, which is a bunch of Atari ST parts screwed to a wooden board, which I guess he must have been maybe the lead designer or something on it. And so it's kind of a neat little prototype photo that you don't often see. Really cool thing, I thought, and just had never heard of this thing.
That is very cool. One of the things I don't know anyone that I had actually heard of this. I don't, being an ST guy, having ST history, but I've never known anyone that had one. But the one thing I will mention, you mentioned the monochrome situation. The ST, as it existed, as a desktop, it had, you could buy a 640 by 400 pixel monochrome CRT, and it was the really nice. It was it was exactly like a Mac LCD. It was white, black and white with that blue, very slight blue tint, very sharp. Or you could buy the standard color monitor, and the ST had 3 graphics modes. One of the standard graphics modes, which is why they sold the monochrome screen, was 640 by 400. So this was basically like having a desktop system with that monochrome monitor. So it's not even as if the software had to be surprised by the fact that it wasn't in color. This was a possible configuration for desktop people, so it had a really good software support. Even some games supported and even took advantage of the higher res of monochrome. So
That's
so
cool.
that's quite a nice it's quite a nice system indeed.
That's cool. Yeah, so that this wasn't like an exception. This was a standard graphics mode for the platform.
And Atari pushed it, with they were really trying to push CAD and desktop publishing a little bit later, and those systems always just were monochrome. They would bundle it with a monochrome screen, even though the system could also accept color because it was non-interlaced, 70 hertz, rock solid, like a Mac screen, but a higher resolution than the original Mac, 640 by 400. So that's quite a machine.
One of the interesting limitations of this ST book, according to this article, is that it did not have revision for an external monitor. So you could not plug like a color monitor into it. So it presumably only did that monochrome graphics mode. Yeah. So it might not be compatible with all software, but apparently they did that to save power. They simplified the graphics hardware, so it only had the monochrome mode. Yeah, that's kind of a neat thing, but it certainly would have been perhaps a deal breaker for some folks who wanted a portable ST, the fact that you couldn't plug in a monitor to get the other modes.
But that would be a system I would view as consider one that I really would like to get a hold of one day.
Yeah, it's beautiful looking. Like, I was surprised how nicely designed it was. Maybe I just like 90s laptop designs, but because I love the PowerBooks as well. But I just thought it was really beautiful to look at it. It had the color scheme and the shape of it and the thinness of it. It's sort of reminiscent of early generation ThinkPads as well. Those were sort of famously nice looking as well, the early ThinkPads. But yeah, and it has just a little bit of color. Like, it's got little splashes of blue for the power button and the Atari logo and stuff. Just really beautiful.
Very nice.
One thing about the cursor control is that its placement, I would think, would put the palm of your hand on your keyboard. That's the only design thing I am not in love with about this. But
that was a curious choice. For those who can't see the stream, apparently this trackpad-like thing, or this disc, this Intellivision disc, was above the keyboard on the right edge of the machine. So I think the idea was you would lay your hand on the desk next to it and kind of put your thumb over it from the right. But yeah, I could see that being awkward and perhaps tiring. Certainly less elegant than the nubbin that the ThinkPads used, and definitely less elegant than the lower center position of the original PowerBook trackballs. But it was an interesting thing. I mean, we were trying everything back then. Nobody knew what was going to work the best. So I could kind of see it. I mean, the nice thing about the PowerBook solution and the ThinkPad solution was that they were ambidextrous, so you could use them with either hand. This one you could only use with your right hand. Another curious omission from this thing is that there's no external mouse connector either, so you couldn't plug in a mouse to use it.
That is curious. That's amazingly curious.
Apparently, according to this article, you could plug in an external keyboard and then plug a mouse into that. So that was a way to get it, but you couldn't just plug in a mouse, which, again, nowadays we would recognize that as a deal breaker for a laptop. But at the time, laptops were new. We were figuring stuff out.
And the floppy drive was external.
Right. Yes, they made that. I thought that was clever that they both came to that same conclusion. Like, the PowerBook 100 had the same idea, and it's a very, very good idea, like one that seemed radical at the time. But the fact was, it saved a ton of space in the machine. It saved a ton of battery power, and you really don't use the floppies as much as you think you do. Like that was such a classic Apple decision to remove something that everyone thought they wanted. And then once it was gone, they realized they didn't need it as much as they thought they did, but everyone got mad when it initially happened. So, cough, headphone jack, cough. But yeah, I remember that being one of my favorite features about the PowerBook 100 was that, I didn't care about floppy disks by then. I didn't want to lug around this heavy mechanical drive that I was never going to use. So good stuff.
Excellent.
Cool.
All right. Let's see. Next thing, Blake, is...
Yes.
Blake, you have the next one.
I have one more. I'll do this quickly. There's a lot of details and history here that people can dig into, but I found it interesting. It's basically, there's an exhibit. Unfortunately, the exhibit is no longer running. I think when I first spotted this, I think it was days away from being finished, and I didn't get it into the at the Museum of the Washington D.C. Modern Art Museum, but it's there are photos, and it's an interesting story. There was a display where you're looking initially as the main piece I can't speak right now, I apologize. As the Pentium processor, its die layout as a Navajo weaving, and seems a curious thing. And reading into it, this particular work is a 1994 production by Navajo weaver Mary Lou Schultz, who commissioned this. She created this and presented it to Intel in 1994 as a gift from the American Indian Sciences and Engineering Society. And what it is, why would this happen? Intel opened years ago, I think it was in the 70s, a chip fabrication plant in New Mexico. And so there were a number of Navajo employees. It became, there was a connection between Intel and the workers, Navajo workers at the plant. I think looking at the history, there was, ups, and there were also some downs with that relationship. But what the artist here has done is taken a very accurate rendered a very accurate representation of the different block units of the Pentium processor. You've got the article that will be linked has a overlay of the different the labeled branch prediction logic section, the instruction decode logic, the code cache, bus logic, that kind of thing. It's a very accurate sort of 10,000 foot view of the Pentium processor itself, and it's just an interesting tribute, kind of a combination of arts and technology, and it was not something that the sort of thing you see very often. The artist is currently apparently working on Fairchild, had a presence in New Mexico as well. And it's a similar relationship, from what I understand, reading into some of the lengthy history here. There's a work being done. She's working on a Fairchild 9040 rendering, and apparently, I think it said in the article, she makes progress of about an inch and a half a day on the tapestry, and you can see in some of these pictures parts of the Fairchild block layout being coming into life, but. And the article that we'll link has further information into a picture of the fab plant in New Mexico and some of the workers. Just an interesting thing that I wish I'd actually spotted a bit earlier, gone to seen it, and also had the ability to kind of post it a little bit earlier than I did here. But the history is worth reading into, and there are related connected articles on the web that go a bit deeper, but. This is it really spoke to me. So you don't see this type of thing every day, but just wanted to share that, despite the fact that it's a little bit after the fact for the event.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, this was on Ken Sheriff's blog, and so in Ken Sheriff fashion, it's it's documented very deeply. He's sort of he's gone into comparing exactly how the chips compare to the weavings and so forth, and it's a long article.
Yeah. No, that's kind of fascinating. But I recall when I first ran across this, I saw a picture of the picture, and it looked like that looks like a pentium, but it also looks like a tapestry. And yes, I was correct. Fascinating.
That'd be actually kind of cool to get such a thing, like a wall hanging. Maybe not actually made in the original Navajo way, but just it is kind of a nice sort of art piece.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
All right, let's see. Am I next? I think I'm next. Okay, I will do my thing now. Sticking on something of a theme. Another thing that just happened since the last time we recorded is that Ward Christensen, the credited for inventing the BBS and I think actually also Xmodem, right? Passed away. So we're getting to that point in the history. But
yeah. I was thinking about that actually with the basic guy news that we're at that age where all of our heroes are dying because all this stuff was invented within a small window of time. So everyone was of a certain age at that time, and now we're 40 years later. So now everyone is dying.
Yeah. But so Ward Christensen had created the first bulletin board system as called CBBS in the Chicago area, basically as a way for, I think it's for computer hobbyists to communicate with each other when there was too much snow to actually meet in person. So
the mother need is the mother of invention, or however that saying goes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so there's some shots. I'm looking at an Ars Technica article here, but there's some shots from Jason Scott's BBS documentary where he was, so Jason got a chance to talk with Ward Christensen then, and he also and in fact actually this is a Benj Edwards article in Ars Technica, but
nice.
Somewhere I don't know where I saw this, but so Christensen had invented Xmodem and actually had his license plate said Xmodem for a while. So that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
I know before it became a little thing, I remember from some of the very early terminal programs that I encountered, or maybe even on one of the old CPM BBSs, I encountered the term Christensen protocol for in the file transfer list. And apparently I was looking, was that something that preceded Xmodem? Apparently that was later called Xmodem. But in some of the software, at the very beginning, people were calling it the Christensen protocol. But that's exactly the same as Xmodem.
Yeah, Xmodem is a little snappier. Rolls off the tongue a little better.
Yeah.
Is there a J in that? Christian? How do you spell that? No,
CHRIS.
I was joking.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, I'm sorry.
I told you it wasn't a good joke.
Humor. Now I feel like a fool.
Okay, I think it's possible we have reached the end of the things that I've noted. There was one other piece of something like news that I came across that maybe I can quickly talk about here, which is that we've got a little bit of advanced notice that the applesauce controller. This is something that you use to do like flux imaging of basically floppies from all kinds of different platforms. I mean, it's called applesauce, and it sort of started as being an applesauce archiving device, an Apple II floppy archiving device, but it's branched out and it can do many, many different kinds of drives and so forth. It's been unavailable for a while, and John Morris has been working on like a version 2, and that's just going out for production now. So if you are interested in getting one, now is a good time to get on the mailing list or on the waiting list. They are, I think they are. Let's see, it's here somewhere, but yeah, it's I think it's approaching $300, not quite, to get one. But the version 2 has a lot of stuff that's better than the original version. It allows you to plug drives in series. So, and it actually also allows you to plug in several drives at once that you can software select between, so you don't have to keep like plugging and unplugging things. And they've been unavailable for a while, so it's this is pretty good news. But I imagine that the first batch is going to sell out relatively quickly. So I just wanted to alert people about this if they're interested in doing this kind of archiving thing. This is pretty excellent news. It's been quite a while since these were gettable, and they're not gettable yet, but you know, they've been sent for production, I think. So
imminently gettable.
Yeah. Okay.
It just is worth saying it is an incredible device. Like, it's so much head and shoulders above every other attempt to make a flux imaging type of device. There's been lots of flavors of these things over the years, but I think people outside the Apple world may not realize how much this thing is head and shoulders above all those other attempts at this. Like, it does everything, and it does everything incredibly well. And it's a whole ecosystem of file formats and emulator support and so on that team has been working on. So it's so much more than just another CryoFlux or another Grease Weasel. Like, it's in a different league, this thing. So don't be put off by the name if you're not an Apple person. It's an archiving and preservation tool for just about every platform now.
Yeah. And yeah, both hardware and software. I mean, like the software is amazing at kind of decoding what kind of image it's looking at, and you can use the software even if you don't have the hardware. I mean, like if you have images you've made with other hardware solutions, it is often possible to convert them and analyze them and so forth in the applesauce software. The only thing maybe is worth pointing out is that the applesauce software itself works only on Mac. So you would need to run some kind of emulator on, and people have done it, you know, to run some kind of emulator on Windows to run the software if you want to, or just get like an older Mac.
Well, and the file formats that go along with it, which were really kind of co-invented with the hardware, like the WAS format, which is a procedural format, so it can effectively emulate weak bits and other things that are just not archivable or not imageable with any other method. So it can preserve copy protected disks intact with copy protection intact. So yeah, it can just do, that's just the tip of the iceberg of what this thing can do. But yeah, like I said, it's so much in a different league than everything else that has come along.
Yeah,
that would make a good bumper sticker. It's not just another Grease Weasel.
Yes, that's one of those things where, you know, like if someone identifies what it is that is saying, they are your new friend for life.
That's the Carrington friend making method. Yeah, it would certainly be a conversation starter.
Yeah, just get it tattoo on your forearm and wait for the person to come up and present themselves.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So now I think we've made it through through all of our items of interest and news, and so now a word from our sponsor. This is going quite slowly. It's okay. It's fun. It's fun. You know, I enjoy it.
We had a lot to talk about in 1981, apparently. I went and looked up a bunch of items because I thought we wouldn't have much to talk about. I didn't think it was a very big year.
I've only got one item. I'll do it quickly.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to find. I had a window with all my auctions in it, and now I've lost it.
As usual, I have no eBay items, so you can skip me.
I got one.
Okay. And we're back. All right, so the host's retrocomputing gift idea this time, since we're sort of heading into, you know, holiday season as we record, at least. Perhaps the holiday season is a distant memory to those who are listening on the feed, but hopefully not. But so the choice this time is a set of floppy disk cookie cutters. So these are 3D printed little frames that you can use to sort of cut outlines of floppy disks out of cookie dough. So these are on Etsy. These particular ones are $13.99, and they're little 3D printed brackets. The reason that I chose these in particular is because these have a 5 1/4 inch model. So there's a 5 1/4 inch and a 3.5, and most of the time, I mean, there are lots of you have many choices for your floppy disk cookie cutter acquisitions out there, but most of them are 3.5 inch floppies, and this is the one. I don't know if it's to scale. It probably is not, but
yeah, it's not. There's the ones with the tape measure in the picture there. You can see it's smaller than
it's smaller
than actual
That's
size, which is good. Like the 5, that's the 3.5. The 5 1/4 is like 4 inches or something.
Yeah.
But which is a good thing, because a 5 1/4 inch would be an enormous cookie. Like this is after all a cookie cutter, so you kind of want them to be cookie sized.
If you go to present a normal person, like I've created a 5 1/4 inch floppy drive cookie in real size, like present it to him, I think they'd be so nonplussed in like 3 different directions that it's, I don't know, it's kind of hard to take.
Yeah. But they look pretty good, actually. There's little pictures here that show the result, probably out of like Play-Doh or something like that. But
yeah, it's kind of neat how it embosses details on it. So it cuts out the outline, but then it embosses like a label and the hub and the window and stuff onto the dough, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, I would. I'm pretty tempted by this. Well, apart from the fact that I'm not tempted to make cookies, but I mean, apart from that, yeah. If I were going to make cookies, I would love to make these.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how the details survive baking, because the dough is going to rise and it's going to tend to close up the little embossing details. So I think you'd have to have a low rise cookie dough for this to be really effective, like maybe like a sugar cookie rather than like a chocolate chip cookie, which is going to rise a lot.
Yeah. I wonder if you could also before you bake it, fill in the little indentations with something that would survive, but I guess they'd still bend.
Yeah, certainly afterwards you could ice the details in, which would be fun as well. Like if there's just enough left over of impression that you could see where the lines were, then you could ice them in and finish it that way.
Yeah, I suppose we get pretty close to the situation where you just have made a square cookie and you paint a disc on it with icing.
Yeah, at that point you might as well just cut out the dough with a knife into squares. And that's save yourself $13.99.
Here's a blurry sheet of cookie for you.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Right. All right. Yes. So now once you're done, getting your floppy disk cookie cutter acquisitions, we can turn our attention to eBay, and Blake has the first auction that we're going to look at.
Yes, I've just got one today. I always find some level of fancy with these types of devices. It's a well, in this example, we have a slot extender box. Basically, if you have a PC with with slots and you need more slots, here's a box with, it looks like a generic PC that itself has additional slots, and you bridge it with a single sort of a plug-in bridge card, basically giving you, I think in this case, it's the 6 or 7 additional slots. I always found these sort of fascinating. I mean, first you have to wonder what the person is using it for. I guess for this would probably be fairly ideal for if you're running a BBS, because those are low speed cards and you could load them up. But I mean, theoretically, who knows? You could, the sky's the limit. This one, I'd never seen this particular brand before. Oddly, the entire auction, and by the way, this is a $499 or best offer device. It looks in excellent condition, and yes, there's some scratches and engraving, but the description is it's a slot box for the Tandy EX. They list basically 15 different models of Tandy, and I don't know why they would do that, because there's nothing really special about the Tandy's 8-bit ISA slots, which is what these plug into and what these add to your system. I don't know why this would be Tandy specific, but in the screenshots, it's presented along with a review, which likely came from some kind of a Tandy related magazine, which speaks, of its use with different Tandy computers. So I'm guessing this would work with any old PC, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, I find them interesting. I used to see the ads. There's a similar, smaller unit for the Apple II. Actually, what is it called? The SCRG switch a slot box, which I recently acquired, wanting to actually add some new additional cards to my 2E. I haven't hooked it up and tried it out yet, but I've got it. Yeah, these extenders, they always seemed interesting to me, because, and they always made for a pretty, kind of a badass looking setup, because, the guy would actually, IBM made their own version of this, and you could have a 5150, and on top of it is another thing that looks exactly like a 5150 doing this. So it makes for a pretty boss looking setup, but which I guess is probably half the value. But yeah, so I always found these interesting, and if you're interested in this one, you can make an offer, and it looks like it ships to coming out of Michigan, and it ships to no, I can't find. Yeah, I think it ships to anywhere in the U.S. But so yeah, that's the one thing I had. Has anybody ever, any of you guys ever had or used one of these types of things for any system? I'm curious.
Nope, never.
No.
Closest I ever got was plugging in expansion cards into the side of my Laser 128 EX, which had slot 7 sticking out the side of the machine, which apparently was for the laser expansion box, and I didn't know that, and I just plugged a card into it, which worked fine.
It worked, yeah.
You just had to be very, very careful not to set your copy down anywhere near said card, and I suppose hope the card isn't too heavy to be hanging sideways by its little edge connector. But yeah, I ran a RAM factor on my laser that way for quite a while.
Cool.
Not recommended.
Oh, nice. I actually go ahead.
I was going to say the IBM, the IBM branded one that looks like a 5150, but is just slots, is the 5161, and that I believe that is quite rare. I mean, it's quite possible that the thing you found is also rare, but less desirable.
Yeah, we talked about the official IBM one on a show recently, actually. I think one of them came up for auction, and we talked about how incredibly rare it is. I didn't know there were other PC ones. This slot box was news to me. Yeah. It seems like such an early 80s thing to me, like a laser and a TI thing to have, or a TRS-80 thing to have these boxes.
Yeah, I had a Laser 128 as well, and I'm sharing a picture of I actually did have the expansion box on my laser. I remember I had a Mockingbird sound card and a slot-based Prometheus modem in mine, which came out of a 2E I had sold earlier. But yeah, that was those things are. Yeah, adding on
how many slots are in it?
Is kind of cool. It's got the laser one has 2 slots. It's slots. I believe it's slot 5 and 7 or 4 and I think it's 5 and 7 because the mouse is sitting in slot 4, I think. But yeah, it just has 2.
Okay.
Which kind of makes sense because the laser is like the 2C. It's kind of got everything built into it anyway, so you don't really need it. So yeah, having one for a Mockingbird or a modem makes a lot of sense. Yeah, those are pretty rare. I've never seen one.
It was allowed. Yeah. I had a strangely, there was a guy that came to her again. I was always in a user group, and the Apple group I was in, I can't remember what he was called, but there was a salesman he was a member, and he was a regional, out of the car sales guy for Videotech or Laser. He would sell. He had like a stock of their stuff at his house, and he came and demoed some of the stuff. And I later went and drove up to his house and bought some of the things for the Laser 128, and that was one of them. So it was fun. But I know you could, with the Laser, you could also, it was officially, I mean, you were allowed to plug something straight into the side. It just was kind of a daunting thing, I guess, to do.
Yeah, I don't think I even knew when I had mine. I didn't know about the Laser expansion box at the time. I just saw the connector on the side. It looked exactly like an Apple expansion connector. I mean, I had a 2 Plus, so I knew what a slot connector looked like. So I just started plugging stuff into it, and it worked. So it's a good thing that was okay, because
I've never seen an ad
for
that. I don't know how you would have known about it.
They certainly weren't common.
Yep.
One thing I always wondered about. I mean, I think about this more in terms of the Apple ones, just because I kind of know how Apple slots work. But I do wonder if you're going to expand, how does it? I mean, like the computer can address a certain number of slots, and if you stuff 2 cards in each of those slots, how does it actually successfully communicate to each of these things?
I think these boxes all solve that a different way. Some of them, they just rely on the IRQ or ROM memory locations not overlapping. I think for the Laser box, I don't know, I'm not certain, maybe Blake, but they often had a switch that you would enable one card or the other. So if you had a card in slot 7 or a card in slot 4 and you enabled it in the expansion box, it would disable like your modem or your mouse, because that was what was internally slot 4.
Yeah, it could be with the Laser one. It could be that it was 7 and 5, and they just weren't mapped to anything. You know what I mean? It could be that was the case.
That's a good point. That is the case. Yeah, the Laser didn't. The 5 would have been mapped to the external 3.5-inch drive, at least on the EX. But the original Laser,
I had the earlier one.
The original Laser didn't have support for that, so that might have been how they got away with that. Yeah,
maybe that's what that was.
Yeah. And then
on the, as we know on the Apple, I mean, slots 1 through 7, they are, they have their very specific uses, and they have their ways of addressing them. On a PC, I don't think there's any concept of, it's slot 3. The slots numbers don't matter. It's just interrupt.
Yeah, as long as the IRQs conflict. Yeah.
So I guess if you,
Christopher says the original Laser had switches on the bottom for internal and external slot 5 and slot 7.
Okay, so I didn't remember that. Yeah,
my EX did not have that, so maybe the switches were in the expansion box, or it handled that differently. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. And I hear that, apparently there's a modern remake of this box has been made before as well. It has been made. So interesting. All right, but yeah, that's what I got from eBay.
Cool. Okay, I have a few things. I'll start going through some subset of them. The first one I came across is a TI 99 4A cartridge holder. So it is, well, first of all, this is a modernly made thing. So this is not from history. This is if you are a TI person and you have a bunch of cartridges floating aimlessly around your room, this is a way to organize them in some sort of nice way. So I thought that was kind of cool. I probably have about that many cartridges and not much more. So this seems like it's a good solution for that. Has a little TI imprint on the front.
I don't think I knew the TI 99 had a cartridge slot. Oh yeah, right on the front. That's what. Oh, that's what that thing is. Okay.
Yeah. It's not the coffee holder.
It's not subtle. I don't know how I missed that, but I guess I didn't realize what that little coffee holder is actually. I don't think
they're not cartridges. They're command modules.
Sorry,
of course.
I apologize.
Command modules. Good.
Anyway, but yeah, this doesn't seem like it's particularly expensive. It's a neat idea. It satisfies a need. So
it is clean, slick.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. What else will I talk about? This in the show notes, I labeled this as "Where's Where," but this is a vintage hat and scarf that says Apple and Pirates on it, and this is one of those things. It's Apple for like some game. I think this is the Pittsburgh Pirates. Is that a sports team? Yeah, so it was sort of some sort of co-branding opportunity with them at some game in the 80s, when they would sell this merch that had both Apple and Pirates on it. But so that makes all the Apple collectors want to get hold of them. So these are $200 hat and scarf that whoever buys it will probably never wear.
We could have another segment of this show that was just weird Apple merch that we had never seen before. Like Apple threw their logo on so much weird crap in the 80s that most of us never saw.
I was laughing. It's not funny until the listeners click the link and take a look. But I thought that the scarf was in fact a very sassy pair of pants. I thought that they were pants with very dangly little flourishes at the cuffs.
They're displayed in a way that really does make it look like that.
Yes.
I assumed this was a reference to the Apple Macintosh team referring to themselves as pirates for a while there. They flew a Jolly Roger on their building and stuff. Mm-hmm. But no, apparently just a cheesy co-branding schlock thing from the 80s, like Apple did a lot of.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Here's another one. So this actually, I put this in before it was all sold out. So this has presently already been sold. But what it is, I will say anyway. It is an Omnitronics cassette interface for the Commodore, and so it is actually an old thing. It's not a newly made thing. It plugs into the user port, and at first I thought, well, this seems like the Commodore had support for cassettes. What is the deal with this? But thinking about it just a little bit longer, what this actually does is allows you to connect like regular cassette players rather than their little data set things. So they had kind of proprietary things, but this actually it's a little box that has a place where you can put the sound in and out and the remote that sort of starts and stops the recording. And another thing that it is sort of sold as a duplicator. So if you want to copy your cassettes, you can use this interface for it. So anyway, I thought this was kind of neat just because it hadn't occurred to me that there would be such a thing, but here it is.
It clearly must have cost less than the data set from Commodore, I guess. I wonder.
I think it may have been the copying aspect of it.
Yeah, I wonder how the copying works there. I guess you have two cassette. It bridges two players together, I guess, if you have them.
And one wonders, like, I don't think you need to involve a Commodore in this process, do you?
Yeah, probably not. In fact, if you had two cassettes and a couple of cables, and two cassette players and cables, you really wouldn't need to involve this device, would you?
Yeah, right. So there are open questions about this. It does seem, but one thing I remember, I think it was Tony Diaz was talking about this, that just because the Commodore drives had a 6502 in them, it was possible to, like, people would set them up so that they would, you had just two drives copying to each other. And when you have like Commodore copy parties or whatever, you just sort of set them up and they run by themselves without the Commodore connected.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. What's the next one? I'll talk about this one. I think I'm not sure why I picked this, but anyway, this is a Next Cube, and it's shown working. It has been recapped. It has the soundbox, keyboard, mouse. It doesn't mention the monitor, so it's possible that it doesn't include the monitor. But cubes are relatively hard to find. This one looks fairly nice. It's got all the pieces that you would want. I think that monitor's got to come with it, based on the fact that it's in all of these pictures. So it's.
the next dimension board is the hottest item in that lot. That gives it the second color display.
Okay.
Yeah, that works in tandem. It provides two desktops, but it has some sort of a RISC processor, as I recall, on it that is actually running the display postscript fast enough on the card so that it can do a meaningful color display. Otherwise, it would be much too taxing on the CPU. Those cards were crazy expensive. It's as big as the motherboard, I think, the Next Dimension card, because the Next Dimension is the name of the whether it's the name of the entire system as equipped. It's also the name. You can see in the back, the motherboard's on the right, and then the huge video processing board is there, and that's quite a thing to have in your cube. And you can have more than one. I think you can have like two or three.
Was that an official Next product, or was that an aftermarket thing?
Oh, okay. It is. But to do the color, I believe it's True Color. It runs, because everything on the screen in Next is running display postscript, which is somewhat analogous to what's happening with Mac OS and its superset thing. But at any rate, it's way too slow, for the CPU to do that kind of processing, in color, in real time, from just the CPU, which is why it has so much hardware on that card. Do they show the card, I wonder, in the Bear card in the pictures? I guess they don't.
I don't think I don't think they've opened the cube in any of these pictures.
This might be a case of like they don't realize how valuable a thing is inside there. Like if they're not a Next person, they might not know that card is special that's in there. This could be a good find for somebody.
Yeah. Well, it's listed at basically $4,500 or best offer. But,
so not a steal. Okay.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money for any Next, but that is a cool one though.
It does sound to me like it's by somebody who has taken care of it. I mean, like it's been recapped, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a mention of that special board in the description? Because Next Dimension board. Yeah. Okay. So they know what they have. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Just priced accordingly.
Reading about it, the Next Dimension board has an Intel i860 RISC microprocessor, 33 megahertz for postscript acceleration, and 8 megs of main memory, which was, not something to shake a stick at back then. 4 meg VRAM, 24-bit color palette plus 8-bit alpha. So basically, it's 32 bits per pixel on that thing. So
that's impressive.
Back in the day, yeah, and that's a big thing. It sold. The Next Dimension card was sold in when it we're trying to find the year for $4,000. The equivalent was $9,000 in 2023 for that board alone.
Jeez.
Yeah. So that's something.
Yeah,
he does know that seller knows what they have.
Yeah, yeah. He says the Next Dimension board's been upgraded to 64 megabytes of VRAM as well, so it's quite a tricked out Next system generally.
Yeah.
People probably gave that guy a wide berth when he came walking down the sidewalk. They're like, no, don't. Give him some space. Too much going on there. He's got 64 meg Next Dimension board.
A lot of street cred.
Yeah.
Amongst Next people.
Yes.
Yeah. So it feels like this is priced maybe correctly, and so if you really want a nice looking one that works and has all that stuff, this is probably fairly reasonable. Maybe but at the highest end of that.
I shudder to think what the shipping on this would be, though, with that megapixel display. Oh boy, those things were heavy. They are so big.
Yeah.
I mean, I shudder to think of the concept of shipping that thing.
Yeah,
that's pretty scary. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be so scary to ship that. I don't know.
If you are near Olympia, Washington, you can pick it up. And that would be
I think for that kind of money, I'd want to do local pickup. And I mean, unless the guy's gonna, guarantee it in some way that it's going to survive shipping, I think I would want to pick it up. It's too much money to gamble on eBay shippers.
Okay, let's see. I think I'll just do one more, I guess, which is so this was sold, but it is a Programmer 101, which appeared on eBay for the first time. Like I don't think I've ever seen one on eBay before. So we have talked about this before, right? It is one of the first all-in-one commercial desktop programmable calculators, is how it is described. But we looked at there was a documentary about this, and it featured people like using it in the bathtub and things like that.
Oh,
if you
that's
remember.
right. Yeah. Okay. I've never seen one outside of that advertisement that we looked at.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it really does look like a cash register or something.
It does. Yeah. It's a
Mhm.
neat looking thing, though. I gotta say,
Yeah.
I've never seen a device that looks quite like this.
Mhm.
It's got a punch card reader in the top. Is that how you program it?
Yeah, I think so. I think there were. Let's see if I can find the photos of them, but there
Kind
were.
of daunting looking.
Yeah. Oh, here it is open. But yeah, there are these little strips that you put in there. So the programs are all on these little cards that you feed in.
That's neat.
Yeah. So yeah, this is in really good shape.
Yeah.
It sold for $4,000, which I think is, again, that is reasonable, potentially even low.
Yeah.
Just given how few. So there's a definitely a fight here between like rareness and desirability, because
Yeah.
I think there's a very narrow set of people that would love to have one of these.
Yeah.
But
yeah, for the right person, that's a very reasonable price, I guess. Yeah. It's a neat thing. That's really cool. Like I would definitely like one of those. I wouldn't pay $4,000 for it, but
yeah.
yeah.
I wonder what year this originally, was sold.
Did I see 1965? Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah.
That's
So
what Wikipedia says.
imagine how advanced this was for 1965. Like have a calculator on your desk that could read punch cards and be programmed.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
That is a real piece of high tech right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I know we did talk about it probably in 265. I guess I think we did discuss this a little bit when
probably
its year came out, and that's probably when we got to see that wonderful movie or documentary.
Yes.
But okay, I think most of the other things that I found were not super interesting. Yeah, so I think I will leave it there because this has already been a pretty long episode. So I guess
that is very cool though.
Yeah. So I guess we've made it to the closing discussion portion of the show. Blake, do you have any closing notes?
I don't think so. Yeah, not really. Just good show.
Okay, great. Maybe I will just insert here for potential later moving somewhere else. But Brian in the chat was talking about the cassette adapter for the Commodore 64 and observed that this would at least potentially let you make a new copy sort of with the computer regenerating the signal rather than just a straight analog copy, which does indeed make sense.
Stronger.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. For me, closing notes. I guess one thing that I did was I went to an estate sale. I forget now when this was. I guess it says October 18th, and it was pretty. I guess I was sharing my screen that whole time as I was clicking around, but it was pretty amazing, actually. It was clearly somebody who had been collecting just all kinds of stuff, largely from the 80s, I guess. But so there was, like all kinds of Star Wars toys, and there were many pens, and there were eventually in here there was a set of computer, like Apple II stuff and Mac stuff. So I thought it was worth actually going. But I mean, even apart from that, it was really just amazing how there's so many little things that I remember from like floating around in my childhood. It was definitely somebody who's collecting. You know, it was very well curated. But so there was a little.
You scrolled through a whole bunch of really cool '80s toys there. My eyes were bugging out. Like, whoa, there was some cool stuff in there. Like Omnibots and robotics, building toys, and
I saw some Star Wars action figures I had entirely forgotten. Yeah. Wow.
And I mean, I think probably some of it was preserved and some of it was accumulated, but yeah, there was a fairly nice sort of like set of, you know, sort of Apple related stuff. There was a Mac there, and a bunch of old magazines, and also some Apple II stuff. And so I decided, all right, well, you know, I will go see. So there's a 2GS in a box, and you know, all of its other various things, and a big box of floppies. So I took the morning and, you know, went out there and stood in line. I think it was something like, I forget now. I was like 90th or something. You know, I got there. I didn't get there that late, but these people who go to these things, they just get there early.
Yeah,
so,
it's flippers. I think that's their business. So yeah, they line up the night before, I'm sure.
Yeah. But so I went, and you know, I went to find. Actually, there was one other thing that was in here, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it easily. But there was the SSI computer Bismarck was hiding in amongst some of the like just sort of tabletop, you know, strategy games.
Oh, good eye.
So I thought, all right, well, I'm going to go seek that out, because that was actually probably the thing that most made me go, because I thought, all right, well, people are not going to notice that this is in amongst all the tabletop games.
Well, and that's a unicorn too, if you can get that.
There it is, hiding in amongst all the other things, because it's the right size, you know. So it looks like it fits there.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a computer game.
Yep. So I went. I was 90th, and by the time I got there, there was like someone had just strung tape over everything, saying, you know, sold. I mean, like somebody grabbed the entire set of these games, and someone grabbed the entire set of the like all the Apple stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's sad, because someone probably grabbed all of the board games and doesn't know what that is. That the computer Bismarck was in there, and they have no idea what that is or why it's special.
Yep.
That's kind of sad, actually.
I haven't been paying too close attention to eBay to know if you know, to see if it pops up and I can figure out who it was that took that. But
yeah, they might list it as vintage board game or something and not realize what it is, and that might be a steal for somebody.
Yeah. So I ended up with basically two things, I think. One was a Super Pong game. So I'm showing the paddles, the Atari paddles that came with that, and then I think the actual Super Pong game is it Super Pong? Ultra Pong. It's one of those. Pong Plus. That somehow didn't get grabbed, so I grabbed that, and I now have that, and then I have that whatever it is, Computer Gamer magazine that showed up earlier.
Oh, do you see? You're showing a picture of the Pong game. Do you see just in the distance behind it is a little robot?
Oh yeah,
with the red. Yeah, I have I have one of those little Tomy red robot. That's funny.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I can see it slightly better here. There's a Merlin.
Oh, I remember that Merlin. Oh man, those things were cool.
They were really cool.
Man, this is like goldmine of '80s toys.
Yeah,
I would like to have just been there and seen it. That must have been really, really cool.
Yeah, just to go look at all that stuff. Oh man! Oh, there's a Game and Watch there. Is that the Donkey Kong Game and Watch? It's just in the corner of the screen, half cut off. Yeah, that right there.
Might be.
Yeah, those things were so cool. Oh, there's a bunch of Game and Watches there. I saw one of the green ones too.
So many electronic tabletop games. It's nuts. The football, that big football.
Yeah,
thing,
the Mattel LED football.
Popeye. Oh, Game and Watch Popeye.
Yes, the Mario Brothers Game and Watch. That's what that was.
I used to like the Popeye.
That's cool.
That's great.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I guess all this stuff was spoken for when you got there.
Oh yeah, there was like almost anything cool was cleaned out.
This is gold. I mean, the dealers. I'm sure they were all lined up the night before for this. Yeah, they know what this stuff is. those vintage toys. Those are going for big money now.
I guess
People
that's
want that
I guess
stuff.
that's how that works. It sounds like you're saying,
Yeah.
Quinn. Like these people.
Yeah, I mean,
If this is you're
it's
saying, you just
yeah. If you have like try to have a garage sale sometime, and like you'll get people like knocking on your door at 5 a.m. asking to see everything before you opened for the day. Like they're super obnoxious about it. Like the dealers, they're just like locusts. They swarm around going to garage sales trying to get all the good stuff ahead of everybody else.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I normally don't pay that much attention to these. I do have a little alert that I'm subscribed to. This is estatesales.net, and basically, I think what I've got it alerting on is just computer, because I mean, like ultimately, I it doesn't fire off all that often, and so yeah, I can look through that many and just see if if it's a computer desk or if it's like a a Dell or something like that. Dude, you can keep your Dell.
I was trying to come up with that same joke. You nailed it. So thanks.
But
dude, not another Dell.
Anyway, yeah. So it was a neat thing. When I saw this come up on the alert, I thought, all right, well, I'm not doing anything that morning. I can go before I go to work, and it was relatively disappointing. Though actually, so in my real life, I teach at a university, and I got into the line. I got my 90 number or something, and I was talking to somebody about something, I don't know what, but it turned out that someone sort of like near me called my name out, and apparently it was like a student of mine from 15 years ago was also standing in this line.
Oh.
So it's like, all right, well, I mostly sort of remember you, but he apparently recognized my voice. So that was strange and bizarre. But anyway, so that was probably the most sort of like retro thing I did. It was interesting. It was interesting to see. It was disappointing, but I did end up with an Ultra Pong.
Oh, this was worth it just to look at these pictures.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Wow, this is nostalgia, like overload, these pictures. Amazing. Yeah. There's just something about 80s stuff. Like it has that look. Like the marketing and the way they did the box art and stuff from that time period, it all just had that look that is just distinguishable.
Yeah. Okay.
That's awesome.
Yep. So those are my closing notes. Quinn, any closing notes from you?
A little bit. I haven't done a ton of retro stuff since we recorded last, but I did play with my Commodore 64 some more. I got my, let me see if I get this right. The 1541 Ultimate 2 Plus is the floppy disk device that I ended up with. And so it's the really, really good final bestest one for sure this time model. And what a nice device that is. Holy cow. Like it's injection molded plastic, matches the machine perfectly. And it does freaking everything. Like it is a drive emulator and it's networking. It does stereo SID emulation. You can connect external speakers to it.
Wow.
It's a modem. It's a printer emulator. And it's got like a menu system built into it that you can like manipulate like files and stuff. Like, holy crap. I just wanted a way to put floppy disk images into the machine, but this thing does that's like 1% of what this thing does. But the best feature, and pay attention, floppy emulator makers, this thing emulates the drive noises.
The noise.
Yes, it has a little speaker on it, and when you're loading disk images, it makes the floppy disk noises. Wow. And I love that so much. And that's the main thing I miss with floppy disk emulators. Sure. I love my floppy emu, don't get me wrong, but the eerie silence as it loads things is off-putting. And honestly, like, is a big part of the experience of using these machines, because much like they had no busy indicators or loading bars or anything in software because the drive was making all that noise. So you knew it was doing stuff. So they didn't need that. But now, like with an emulator, oftentimes the machine is just locked up apparently for long periods and you don't know, is it doing something? I can't tell. Like, is the machine crashed? But no, if it was real hardware, there would be floppy disk noises telling you that it's still doing stuff. So it's not a trivial part of the experience. But yeah, so I love that. I love that it makes the noises. I think the floppy emu, I looked this up, it actually has it has a purchasable accessory module that will add the noises. Yeah, there it is on the screen. Yeah, the noisy disk sounder attachment. So I might have to pick that up if it works well, because that's such a killer feature of the 1541 Ultimate. It caught me
Is
off
it like
guard.
a sample? Like a sample of sound, or is it like
No,
click?
it's good. Like it's similar to what Virtual 2 does. It's actually emulating what the drive head is doing. So it makes
Oh,
the
I
same
see.
noises that the real drive would be making loading that same data. So it's
I see.
very well executed. Yeah, it's not just a cheesy loop of some drive noises.
Mhm.
It's actually
It's good. It
Who
looks
emulation.
like
makes
it has
this
like a
device?
relay that clacks.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, that's so the floppy emu one might just be the stepper motor noise then that it's making, and not the rest of the noises. But anyway, so the 1541 is excellent. Strong recommend. Fantastic device. And so I fired up Space Taxi because that was recommended to me. If you just want to play one Commodore game and you don't know where to start, just play Space Taxi. And so I did, and it's great. I played a lot of Space Taxi, so I had a lot of fun with that. I also played, I think, last time we recorded, maybe I talked about that game Security Alert, which was a game I played at a friend's house, and I couldn't remember the name of it. And I had an extremely vague description of it, involving like a tile-based game with wrenches and pliers and stuff. And the fine folks at Lemon 64 identified it based on that incredibly vague description. And so I actually got that game as well and played it. And holy cow, what a nice looking game that is. It is so much better looking than I realized. Like, if you want to see what the Commodore is capable of graphically, I think that's a really good place to start. I mean, it is a full screen scrolling tile-based game, tons of colors, tons of detail, like mouse interface, full GUI interface, and it's a good game to boot. So I had a great time playing both of those. The only downside really is the same downside that I always have with retro gaming, is that these games are so hard. Like, they are so much harder than I want them to be as an adult with not a lot of free time. When you're a teenager and have good reflexes, you don't mind sitting there dying over and over and over again for hours on end. But it's less attractive as an adult. But aside from that,
you should try Drop Zone as well. Archer McLean's Drop Zone. It's really good. It's a Defender basically, but it's really cool. Yeah, that's a famous one, and he's quite the fellow. Who's the person or the company behind the device? I just wanted to. Do you remember?
I don't remember. No, but
what was the full name of the device again? I'm sorry.
If you Google 1541 Ultimate, you'll find it. There's a bunch of different models. The most full-featured model, I think, is the Ultimate 2 Plus. But they're not that expensive either. Like, they're super reasonably priced, and the build quality of it was shockingly good. Like, for a hobbyist kind of device. Every time I buy something for the Commodore, I'm reminded how much further ahead that community is in terms of this kind of stuff than like the Apple community is. Because like, we have some 3D printed stuff and some bare boards that you can buy to do a few things. And meanwhile, the Commodore people, like, you can buy a power supply for your Commodore on Amazon. Like, it's so much more of everything over there. And it's a lot more sophisticated in everything. So and that's the last nice thing you'll hear me say about Commodore, and I'll deny having said all of this. Boo Commodore.
Yeah, I'm pretty tempted by that. I think I have some Commodore device, but it's definitely not that one.
I mean, if you just want that one device that's going to solve like every retro integration problem, it's that one. Like, it's similar to how someone asks me, what should I get for my Apple II for floppy emulator? I would just say, buy a floppy emu. Like, it's the best one. But for the Commodore, this one is, if you only buy one thing, I would say definitely buy this. It was an awesome experience.
Very cool.
Does Gideon's Logic sound familiar? Does that seem like where you got it?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe yes. I don't remember.
Yeah. Anyway, I see it as a place to buy them, although all the prices are in euros. So
Gideon's Weitzer,
I did have to pay for it in euros, and shipping took forever. It took weeks and weeks to get it, but it shipped from Sweden or something. But
okay, cool,
nice. That's very cool.
That's me. That's my little retro adventure.
Well, you're having some fun over there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Nice.
All right. Okay. I guess we can call it there. Really has been a long show, but it's good to be back. It's good to do it again. It's kind of fun to
Yes.
catch up.
It's been a while.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
So that is it for this show. You can find the show notes for this and all the RCR shows at rcrpodcast.com. You can find lo-fi episodes and more via Gopher at rcrpodcast.com. You can discuss the show in the forums at forum.vcfed.org somewhere. You can follow RCR on Mastodon. We are at podcasts.social at RCR Podcast. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/RCR Podcast. And you can send feedback to feedback@rcrpodcast.com. If you wish, you could write a review on iTunes. And until next time,
Retrocompute.
Yep.
Wait, we have to have like a hand signal because we all just like wait for someone else to start, and then we just sit there staring at each other like idiots for 20 minutes.
That was pretty much on target. That was simultaneous. It doesn't matter, I guess, but
yeah, because I will slide them together. But it might be a fun experiment just to see how long.
Yeah, let's play Retrocompute Chicken. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us in the stream.
Thank you.
Not very much lead time on the announcement and a very long record.
Yes, we have the most understanding fans of any podcast in history. They always show up for our recording on zero notice, and maybe it gets canceled. Who knows?
Yeah.
And then it's 3 hours long anyway.
I'm going to go try out one of those procedurally generated space games now and see how it fits.
Yeah, those are a new thing I hear. Yeah.
Okay. Bye, YouTube.
Bye, YouTube.